Okay, nice to meet you guys. Thank you all for having me. My name is Justin Stivers. I'm the owner of the Probate Law Firm. So my office is 1395 Brickell Ave, just on the other side of the bridge here in Brickell. But we're operating in about 17 counties throughout the state of Florida. I do probate, and that's it. So I don't do real estate. I don't do title. I don't do evictions, landlord, tenant, anything like that. I'm very niched into one area. So I kind of talk about it in two ways. So before people pass away, I write their wills, trusts, power of attorney, that sort of thing. And then after people pass away, we do what's called probate, which is what I'm going to talk about today. So I started doing this presentation earlier this year because I think a lot of realtors don't know what probate is. It's kind of a unique term and they're not really too familiar with it. But chances are, being here in South Florida, you're going to come across a deal. We were talking earlier where someone passed away and now you've got to go through the legal process known as probate. We've got a lot of old people in Florida, so chances are it's going to happen. So my kind of goal of this presentation is three things. One, help you guys know what probate is, because it might be a brand new term where you've never heard of it before. Two, when you're speaking with a prospective client, just give you all enough information so that you can kind of stand out from the other realtors, so that you sound, so that you can talk about it and sound kind of more informed. And then three, at the end, hopefully give you some ideas to how to find listings for probate, because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, is making money and having listings. So what I'd like to do is just to kind of get an idea of who's in the room. Maybe we can go around just like real quick, name how long you've been a realtor, and then if you've ever come across a probate property at all, and maybe what that experience was, good, bad, awful, or that sort of thing. So, you want to start?
Hi, my name is Manny Corbello. I was here about 3-ish years now.
Okay, great.
Not really any experience with any probate.
Okay, cool.
I'm Carlos Boldorini, 15 years in the field.
Okay.
No probation at all.
Okay, great. Yes, sir.
Volker Welsen, 15 years, and had one experience. It didn't work out well.
Not good. Yeah,
because it took too long.
Yeah.
And the buyers quit, found another property.
And I'm going to talk about how long the probate process takes generally, so that's something you can tell your buyers as well, because a lot of times when a buyer gets into a deal and they hear probate, maybe it's not explained to them how long this could take, and then they just get frustrated and they walk away. So, yes, ma'am?
Hi, my name is Diana. I have my license for a long time, but I just started working about 10 months ago.
Okay, great.
I never had experience.
Okay.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Since you said about old people.
Yeah. Yep.
So positive.
Right. I like it.
Me and Brianny, 5 years, and I never had an experience with probate.
Okay.
I'm Juliana.
Juliana.
9 years in real estate, and I never got in a sale or purchase of probate, but I had some experience with the process because recently me and him and another partner decided to start flipping homes.
Okay, great.
So probate is part of one of the properties that we were exploring as good properties for.
Yeah.
But I never really got to get one good.
Yet.
And, the two houses that we bought were just foreclosures and not probate. So.
Okay, perfect.
And I'm Silvio. I've been in the business for 10 years. This is first time I'm hearing this term.
Okay. Well, then that's a good. Oh, also, if you guys want, I brought super healthy pastelitos. So if you guys want any, please help yourself.
Before the probate, yeah?
Yeah, before that.
Before you get the probate.
Go for it. Help yourself. So it's a good segue then. So what I want to do is just real quick give you all, so that you get,
Before you said, I received a lot of emails in the last, last year, for people offering, probate. What happened with the probation that everybody's talking about that? This is curious to me because,
right.
In 15 years I never received it. But a lot of emails, for people.
Well, I think it probably goes back, like what I was saying earlier. I've seen a lot more recently because I think maybe, the baby boomers or, just before them, their generation who had properties are starting to pass away. And so that's why you're starting to see a lot more property. So before I kind of like go into that, let me just explain, because I don't think everyone knows what,
It was a.
yeah, I don't think everyone knows what probate is. So just to give you guys an idea of some kind of working definitions. So probate occurs after somebody has passed away. So the way that probate starts is someone has died. And how that relates to you all is that, let's say John owns a piece of real estate. He owns 123 Main Street in Miami. He owns that piece of property. When he dies, that property is now owned by the estate of John Smith. ESTATE, the estate of John Smith. And the only way that that property can be sold, can be purchased, is if you go through what's called a probate, which is a legal process. There's judges, there's attorneys, there's courts, and at the end of the process, the judge is going to basically give you a new deed saying that you can sell the property. So whenever you hear the word probate, what I always think about is there's courts, there's judges, there's attorneys, and you're just trying to, for real estate, be able to get the property to be able to have marketable title to be able to be sold. That's kind of the best, general definition that I can give of it. A couple other terms that you guys will probably hear. Estate, so I just mentioned that, ESTATE. What that is basically everything that, let's say, John owned when he was alive. He owned his car, he owned his house, he owned jewelry, all of that was John's. Now that John's died, it's all owned by his estate. Okay, so that's what estate means.
Liabilities and assets. Huh?
Liabilities and assets. So if he owned credit card bills, hospital bills, whatever, his estate has to pay that. Decedent, I think I have that on there. Decedent, that is just what we call someone who's passed away, a dead person, essentially. Last will and testament. Has anyone ever heard of a will?
Yes.
What is a will?
Is before you die,
Right.
you already put all your assets and
Yeah.
choose what to do with them after.
Yeah, perfect. So basically, while I'm alive, I could say, hey, I want my wife to get my house, I want my kid to get this. It's a piece of paper that you have written down that says who gets what. One question I get asked a lot is, there's not a master database that I could go in and find everybody's will. Because I could basically, write this down. There's certain requirements, have it witnessed, I could give it to Silvio, and then no one else knows that I had a will except for him. So my parent, no one would ever know. So if everyone comes to you and says they have a will, you're going to want to ask if they have a copy of it. Because otherwise, I can't go to will.com to look it up. They're not recorded with the court, usually. So anyways, that's one thing I get asked a lot. And then probably most importantly, the person is what's a term called personal representative. Also called executor. When you all, as the realtor, are working to sell a piece of property, you need to make sure you're working with the personal representative, because only the personal representative can sell the property. And what the personal representative is it's he or she is the person that was named by the court to be able to sell the property, to be able to administer the estate. That's the person you need to be working with. I know that's like a lot of like, it's early and you guys maybe are like, that's really dry stuff. Any questions? Those are just general. I'm going to explain a little bit as we go through some situations, but generally, is that kind of clear, or maybe questions about that? No? Okay. So what I want to do though, first, your first, when you're out there is how do you find out if a property needs to go through probate? How do you know if it needs to go through the courts to be able to be sold? So I guess you all are all pretty seasoned agents. What's the first thing someone says, hey, Carlos, I've got a piece of property, can you sell it? What would be the first thing you'd do?
An agent?
Yeah, an agent.
Who owns it?
Who owns it? Yeah. So how would you go find that?
By a tax record.
Tax record. Yeah, go to the tax record. So one of the first things you're probably going to do is you're going to go to property appraiser website, the tax roll, and you're going to find out who the owner is. So I gave you all a couple different examples. So look, I don't have them on me, but so look at the one that the owner shows Maida Silva. Does everyone see that one?
Mayra Silva.
Sí, Mayra Silva.
Yeah. Jesus Silva and Mayra.
Jesus Silva, yeah. Mine.
Oh, excuse me. Let me start with another one. The address is 11309 Southwest 200th Street, Maria Pichardo.
Yeah.
11309 Southwest 200th Street. Does everyone see that one? Okay, so you see under the owner, it says Maria Pichardo, and then after that it says EST of. What, estate of. So what that means is, if you were to go and you were to find a property either for the buyer or the seller, and you pull up the tax roll and you see EST of after their name, 99.9% of the time that means it's got to go through probate. So this property, before it could be sold, before it could be purchased, it had to go through probate. So this is one we did. So if you were to go and look at this property now, actually, well, the deed was just recorded. But if you were to look at it tomorrow, you'll see that now the owner shows Anna Buchardo, because that's the new owner. So she inherited the property, but she couldn't do anything until she hired, us or a probate attorney to put the property in her name. Yes, ma'am.
But when a property is sold in the state, because you don't have the inheritance, like someone dies, the family, the kids, and the wife doesn't inherit the house. Like, how does it work? Why the property goes for sale from the court when it happens?
Well, it doesn't go through sale from the court. So what happens is there's a series of documents that we give to the judge, okay? And the judge is going to see that Maria, she's the mom, she died, but she was the owner of the property. But when she died, she's still the owner, but obviously you can't have someone who's passed away sign closing documents or anything selling it, right? So the court has to say, we have to present to the judge, these are Maria's heirs, they're going to inherit the property, now we need to put the title in their name so that they can sell it. So that's what the probate process is. So whenever you see this, if you were to, let's say Anna, okay, because that's the daughter, let's say Anna calls you and says, I want to sell my mom's house. My mom passed away, I want to sell this house. Well, if you just go through the closing process, you're going to get to the title, and title's going to say, I can't do it. You've got to go through probate first. So it's a good idea, when you're looking at properties and you see that EST of, you should just start thinking, okay, this is going to have to go through probate. So this is probably one of the easiest ways to identify whether or not a property needs to go through probate.
So when it changes to EST, that's all automatic?
Good question. So there's a couple ways that it happens. So the death certificate gets issued, and usually the state of Florida will then send it to the county, and the counties will run their records, and then they'll update it automatically. Okay. Or sometimes what happens is the people who are going to inherit the property, they think, hey, I'm the only heir, I'm going to get this property. They go to the county themselves, and they say, and they tell them, which is not a good idea, because what happens? Well, Maria was getting homestead exemption on this property. Does everyone know what homestead is? Yeah. So homestead, if you don't, it's a tax reduction. If it's your primary residence, the main place that you're living, you get up to $50,000 tax reduction. But if Anna goes to the county and says, hey, my mom died, the county's going to say, okay, too bad. Now the property's owned by her estate, and you lose you lose the homestead exemption. So if you have a client, a good piece of advice, you can say, well, don't go notify them just yet. Wait till we do everything else.
So you have to hire a lawyer. I mean,
yes,
to do the process.
to do the process. Yeah.
And if the person has a will?
Doesn't avoid probate, and I'll touch on that in here in a bit. Okay, so that's the easiest way to kind of notice if a property needs to go through probate. Let's look at the second one. So property address is 1821 Northwest 33rd Street. And you see the owner is Jesus Silva, EST of, and Maida Silva.
Two owners, right?
So this is pretty common here in South Florida. So Jesus, you can see EST of after his name, which means estate of, which means we know probate. But you also see Maida Silva. So what this is Jesus was the father, Maida is the daughter. Okay, Maida was the only child. So they were on the deed 50-50. Jesus dies, Maida wants to sell the property. She thinks, hey, well, me and my dad, we own the property, he's dead, I get the property. So she gets a realtor, they go through the entire process, go to closing, and the title agent says, no, you can't sell it, you've got to go through probate. And so she was, rightfully kind of angry because she wasted 4 or 5 months, not when she shouldn't have started the probate. And so this is what happens a lot of times. People think well, I'm the only child, or if I'm already on the deed, I'm automatically going to get the property. And so then they start trying to sell the
In the
property.
same way, husband and wife.
Husband-wife is different because it automatically goes to the surviving spouse.
So she can.
So yeah, if Jesus was her husband, then yeah, it would have automatically gone to
So
her.
it's a different.
Different
matter.
incident,
So it
yeah.
doesn't go to EST when a husband and wife. It doesn't go to
No.
They both are entitled.
Yeah, they're both on title, and so if it's John and Sarah and John dies, it automatically goes to Sarah.
If they are not both entitled.
Right, if they're not both entitled, yeah.
If they are not both.
But when they
I
are
am
married,
just myself and my wife. What happened?
That might have to go through probate.
Yeah.
That
when
might have to
you're
go through
married in the
probate.
United States, from what we learned at school especially, the marriage owns all the assets bought after the marriage. So in this case, even having one person in the title doesn't automatically have the spouse as a second owner. You have to go to.
You generally need to have, you generally need to have the deed written in a way, and you probably want to put your spouse on there. Because you might still have to go through probate. Yeah.
So it's always good to have
It's good to have both on
the
there.
spouse.
Yeah. But this is common here in Miami, especially where you've got friends or brothers and sisters or, business partners who own property together, to notice that. Just because you're both on title doesn't mean you're both going to inherit. All right, and then the last one, 13926, Karen Rodman, TRS. So talking about ways to avoid probate. If you see this, that TRS means trust, okay? And so a trust is a way to avoid probate, okay? So Karen S. Rodman has a trust. The owner of this piece of property is her trust. Her beneficiary is Karen Rodman, which is same name, but it's her daughter. So when Karen S. Rodman passes away, her daughter's automatically going to inherit the property, and it's not going to go through probate. So there's a couple ways to avoid probate, something you can tell your client. A trust is probably the most sophisticated way to avoid probate. It's a separate document. They're sort of complicated.
And it's more expensive as well.
Yeah, I would say for just a piece of property, an average trust is going to cost between $1,200 and $1,500 to do. One important thing, just so that you guys know, so a trust is a separate document. So I create a trust, but you actually have to create a new deed that says the owner of that property is the trust. Otherwise, it doesn't mean anything.
You have to go through the deed process.
Yeah, so you actually have to change the deed as well. Because sometimes people will say, they'll go get a trust, they'll create a trust, great, perfect. But if the property is still in their name, it doesn't matter. It's still going to go through probate. So a trust is one way to avoid probate. Another way is has everyone heard of owning a property joint tenants with right of survivorship? Have you heard that terminology before?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a type of deed that you can have where you can both be on the deed, and then when one of the person dies, it automatically goes to the surviving person. So that would avoid probate as well. And then the other thing you asked about a will, so a will does not avoid probate, okay? So a lot of people have a will. Let's say I have a will and says I leave my property to my cousin, okay? I own the property. I own 123 Main Street. It's owned by Justin Stivers. I pass away. My cousin has a will. In the will, I say I give 123 Main Street to him. He's still going to have to go through probate. He'll get the property at some point, but he can't just take the will to the property appraiser or to the court and say, look, I'm the new owner, Justin left it to me. He'd still have to do the probate process. So that's a lot of times people think that having a will avoids probate, but it does not.
How long it takes the probate?
Yeah, so I'll talk about that in a second. Yeah.
So having a will, what would be the easiest way to avoid probation?
The easiest way to avoid probate, it depends on your situation. So, if you have multiple properties, I would probably say a trust makes the most sense. If you have,
Your homestead.
if you just have your homestead and you have one kid or two kids, let's say you have two children and you want your kids to inherit the property, you can do another type of deed, which is called a ladybird deed. I don't know if anybody's heard of that, but basically what that is you can put your kids on the title. They don't have any ownership rights. They can't do anything with it while you're alive. But when you pass, they automatically get the property. And so, you know, usually we do those deeds for like $495 as opposed to a trust, which is like $1,250. So they're more cost effective. But if you have, you know, a bunch of different people that you want to leave the property to, it could be a little more.
Well, if the kids are under 18 or something, how are they gonna sell
you
the
can't do
property?
it. Yeah, you can't
do it, right?
Yeah.
You have to wait until they.
Yeah.
And if you want to live for someone that is not your kids, is not your wife, is no one related, like legally to you,
You can do that. I mean, this is like probate 102, but you can't leave. You can't really disinherit your spouse. So if you have your primary residence, like I have my main house, I can't say I don't want my wife to get this property. You can't do that. She or he is still going to get it. You'd have to just get divorced and then.
and if you don't have kids and a wife, who's your parents?
Are you asking like? Are you? Is this a hypothetical, or are you asking me like for a specific instance?
No, I just want to know all the scenarios, like, because I had someone asking me that question about
Yeah.
probate. And like, when you buy a property, like someone that is a single person buy a property in the United States.
Right.
And he doesn't have a spouse or kids.
Right. Okay.
And I mean, who will,
And then he dies. Who would get it?
What do we have with this property
Yeah.
here?
So good question. So if you don't have a will and you're that case, so I'm not married, I don't have children, I die, who gets my property? Well, there's a kind of a hierarchy of who gets what. So first it goes to your spouse. If there's no spouse, it goes to your children. If there's no children, it goes to your parents. If there's no parents, then it would go to your brothers and sisters and then grandparents. So there's kind of a hierarchy of who gets it. We just did one right now where the person passed away. He had basically no family, but you still have to find his distant heirs. So it was going to like his great nephew and great niece. It went like
What
We saw a phone call, hey, you have a property now.
yeah, exactly.
What
Yeah,
happened with the girlfriend that they lived with him 10 years or 10 years?
it doesn't matter. She doesn't get anything.
She doesn't get them.
No,
No friend.
no, she doesn't
When
get.
you
And if the property has a mortgage, the person that inherits the property inherits the mortgage.
Well,
and if they do not can afford the mortgage, they just go to foreclosure.
Exactly.
Concubinato
Exactly.
también.
But the heir is not liable.
You're not
it doesn't
liable.
affect their
No,
credit
no,
rating.
you're not
They
liable.
just lose the house to the bank.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
There we go. Someone's eating. Good.
Can I have a question?
Yes, ma'am.
For example, if somebody is married and let's say one is dying, the other person is receiving all the liabilities, right? All the debts.
So, good question. It's kind of the same thing. So, generally, you are not so if you're not on the mortgage, you're not responsible. So I could inherit the property from my parents, but I'm not on the mortgage, so the mortgage company is not going to come after
I
me.
don't wanna
your
pay.
credit is not affected.
My credit's not affected. But if I want to keep that house, I need to pay it off.
I better to make payments.
Or you
I-
can make the payments go through probate when you
Yeah,
you sell the house.
you usually can't just take over a payment though, because
Oh, you have to pay off?
well, or take out another mortgage to pay off that first mortgage. Because when you go take out a mortgage, that mortgage company is checking your stuff. So they might now, if they don't know, and I'm just making payments, okay, maybe that works.
Because of the property, let's say credit cards, for example, person will have to pay this for the husband and wife.
If the wife is not on the credit cards, then no.
No, then it just disappears or what?
It just is, well, it's a longer answer, but if there's no money, there's no money. They don't get paid. In the probate process, we would fight them. So if, let's say in that case, the husband had $100,000, okay, but he had $50,000 of credit card debt. Well, the wife is not responsible, but the credit card company could come after that $100,000. So I'm going to fight the credit card companies to either reduce it or get them completely stricken so that she gets the entire $100,000. But they're not going to come after her personally. They're not going to say,
Right.
hey,
Her
you
name is
owe.
on there.
Yeah, no, if her name's on the credit card, then yes.
Yeah.
But if her name's not on there, then
Something that I think that is important because most of our clients are foreign nationals.
yeah, sure.
If you have a property here and your hair is like are in a different country,
Right.
you have the state taxes that is about 40% that they have to pay, right?
Right.
But besides that, I mean, is that the probate process happens here, happens in the country where they are from?
Yeah.
It's more complicated, right?
No, we do. I mean, we've done them for clients in Trinidad, Bolivia, Venezuela, Russia. I mean, we've done them in most countries.
So all they have to do, the family has to hire a probate attorney here?
Pretty much. I mean, it depends on. So, let me answer this, and I'm going to move to a different section just to keep us on track because that's an advanced question. But basically, and I guess it's relevant because you guys deal mostly with Brazilian clients or
A lot
South
of foreign
America.
okay,
nationals.
South America. All right, so let me talk on that, so it's relevant. if the person, let's say the person, what country do you guys work with mostly?
Brazil.
Brazil. So let's say that you have a client in Brazil. He or she he was a resident of Brazil. He lived in Brazil. He had assets in Brazil. They're going to have to do a probate in Brazil first, okay? But let's say he had 2 investment properties here in the United States. Well, they're going to do their probate first in Brazil, and then they're going to come to me. Their attorneys or whoever they're using in Brazil is going to say, this is what the court said in Brazil, and then I'm going to take that and show that to the court here in the U.S. and they're just going to mirror whatever. So if let's say that someone had a will in Brazil, right, and it says everything goes to this person in Brazil, once the court in Brazil says it's a valid will, I'm gonna take it to the court here and say, look, the court in Brazil already said it's good, and the court here will say that. And then we'll still have to do a probate process here because the probate in Brazil doesn't have any authority over the probate here, but you'll have to have 2. So we do that. One we're working on right now for Trinidad and Tobago. He had a pretty big estate in Trinidad. They had to do that whole process first. But he had 5 properties here in Broward, in Miami-Dade.
Under his own name, not a corporation.
Just in his name.
Yeah.
Just in his name. And so the family, I couldn't start the probate until they finished it in Trinidad because I needed the paperwork there. And it was really, really slow there. It took like 2 years.
Oh.
So I'm just waiting. I mean, it's a Caribbean island. So I'm just waiting. I waited for them. So the family had to keep paying the taxes because you don't want to stop paying the taxes or they'll foreclose. They kept paying the taxes, mortgage, and everything. And now we just finally started, and we're going to get them. And now they're going to sell them. So yeah.
Let's say, for example, from what I know, if the father used to even with his son here in the US, let's say $100 million, son only will get like 70 because he has to pay taxes, right?
Yeah.
The government, even if it's receiving from his father. So if somebody is receiving property, do they have to pay also some extra tax to the government? The money? Or?
That's kind of complicated. Chances are they're going to have to pay some taxes. Yes, chances are they're going to have to pay some taxes. But I don't want to get too far into the taxing. Yeah.
Just buy the apartment under corporation.
Yeah. Corporations are good, and a lot of foreign nationals will do that. I always say though, they should go an extra step and say, what happens if the company dissolves, or because a lot of times you'll have someone create an LLC or a corporation, but they're the sole member of that LLC, and it's like, okay, well now when they pass away, we don't know what to do because they don't have any documents. And so it's a good idea to have an operating agreement or some sort of documents behind that saying what happens with the assets of the
shares.
Right, exactly. Because otherwise, you're still probably going to have to go through probate. If you just have someone who has an LLC and it's owned by John Smith, well, if there's no other members of that LLC and there's no other documents, we're probably still doing probate.
I see.
Yeah.
That's important information for us.
Yeah. All right, so all great questions. So one thing once you've identified that a property is going to go through probate, when you go and speak with this person, there's a couple things you want to know. I always tell realtors, ask what was the relationship to the person who passed away. So is it your mother, is it your father, is it your cousin, whoever it is. Again, the reason being is if it's a second, third, fourth, fifth cousin, most likely they're not going to inherit the property. And so I've seen a lot of realtors working with somebody, again here, I'm just using cousins because it's kind of a common example. If there's 2 cousins that were really close and one cousin was taking care of the other cousin while she was sick, and the living cousin thinks that he gets the property, well, if that other cousin had a spouse, had children, had parents, had brothers, sisters, they're all going to get the property before he is. And so you don't want to be wasting your time speaking with somebody who's never going to inherit the property. So one thing to always ask is, what was your relationship to the person who passed away? The second thing I always say is, ask if they had a will. Because again, we talked about a will. In a will, you can name who's going to inherit a piece of property. So if they have a copy of the will, that would be great. So you can say, okay, good. Now let me give this to the attorney.
This is when you're working with the listing.
When you're working with the listing, yeah. I'm kind of talking about
before you list it.
Right. I'm kind of talking about the listing side of things right now.
How much are the taxes for probation when somebody died? How much is the state taxes for?
Florida doesn't have state tax, and there's an inheritance tax that's federal. But you only get taxed if your estate is worth more than 15 million. Yeah.
So it's not worry when somebody dies?
If you just have one piece of property, you don't need to worry about it. If you don't have assets worth more than 15 million, you don't really need to worry. 15, 1 5, yeah. Okay, so see. All right, and we talked about having a will doesn't necessarily avoid probate. We talked about length of time. So that's probably one of the big concerns that your clients will have, and that you could potentially lose out on a buyer if it takes too long. So I'm going to give you 2 scenarios to give you an idea of how long it takes. The first scenario is if someone died recently. So someone died within 2 years. Okay, so from the date that we open the probate. So let's say we start the case today, August 27th, 28th, and they died in 2018. It's going to take us about 1 month to get the personal representative appointed. And remember, the personal representative is the person who can sell the property. They're the ones who's going to sign the closing contract, the closing deed, statement, and everything like that. So it's about 1 month to get the personal representative appointed.
And that comes from the will, basically.
The will, it comes from the court. The will, if there is a will, the will is going to nominate someone.
To nominate, yeah.
Right. If there's no will, then it goes through that hierarchy of what I said.
Okay.
But even if the will says who the personal representative is, you still need a piece of paper from the court saying that they're a personal representative.
Okay.
So if they come to you and say, hey, look, here's my will, Justin nominated me as personal representative, you still have to wait until we get something from the judge saying that they're the
And
person.
that's like a 30 days.
And that's like a 30-day process. Okay, so we've got 1 month, now we've got the personal representative appointed. Now we've got month 2, month 3, and month 4 where we're waiting. Okay? So during those 3 months, there's not much that we can do. You can't sell the property, you could list it, you could go under contract, but you can't actually sell. And the reason is, in Florida, you have a 90-day period where, going back to her example, if someone had any creditors, if they owed money to the bank or to the hospital, to the credit card company, they have 90 days from the date that the personal representative was appointed to tell us, the attorney, hey, we're owed money. 90 days only, and then they can't do anything. And during that 90 days, usually the judge won't let us sell the property because they want to wait and see if anybody says they're owed money.
Because all the money due has to be paid at the time of the closing of the property, right?
Well,
Yes.
before
essentially,
that,
yeah.
even, like, we need a listing agreement signed. Who's going to sign that?
And I'm going to talk on that in a second. That's a good question. Yeah, I'm going to talk. So 3 months you can't really do anything, and then month 5 you all can sell the property. Okay. So I always tell people, if the person died recently, so within 2 years, if they died recently, the probate's going to take about 5 to 6 months on average. Could be a little bit longer, could be a little bit shorter, but about 5 months. If the person died more than 2 years ago, okay, so 2015, 2014, still going to take us about 30 days to get the personal representative appointed, but we don't have to wait those 3 months. So in month 2, you can go ahead and sell the property. So if the person died further back, so the more time that's passed over 2 years, probate's going to take about 2 to 3 months. But on average, most of the time when you start a probate, they've died recently. So I would say on average, it's about a 5 to 6 month process. But like you had an experience where they take longer, if you have siblings who are fighting, brothers and sisters, each have their own will, or we've got one we're trying to finish, and the siblings are in Israel, and they live in the middle of nowhere, and they don't want to sign anything. It can take longer. So there's situations that arise that can make it longer, but on average, about 5 to 6 months. But great question. So like I said, the personal representative is the person you're working with. But you don't want to wait. If you go out and find a property today, you don't want to wait 30, 60, 90 days to have that client sign a listing agreement, because they're not sophisticated. Most likely they don't know. They're going to go down the street to another brokerage and say, hey, they couldn't help me. Can you help me? So what I always tell realtors is, the personal representative has to be appointed by the court, okay? And they're not personal representative until you have that paper from the the judge. But you don't want to wait. So what I say is, let's say someone comes in and says, my mom died, I want to sell the property, I'm going to be the personal representative. Okay, great. Well, first, maybe call me or call another attorney just to ask the right questions to make sure that you think they're going to be the personal representative. We give you the green light, yep, sign them up. Have them sign the listing agreement as, let's just say their name is John. So say John as proposed personal representative of the estate of whoever passed away. So if you put that language in there, proposed, meaning they're not yet personal representative, but they will be personal representative. This way, you lock them in. You have a listing agreement, and they're, now essentially they're your client. Now, you can't list that property yet. Okay, I would not recommend that you list that property because if you go under contract and they're not personal representative, they can't sign anything. Right? So this is really just the listing agreement with that language, proposed personal representative, is really just to kind of get them mentally thinking that you're going to be their realtor, that you're going to be their brokerage. Now, once we get the personal representative appointed, whenever they sign a contract or whenever they sign anything, now they're going to say John as personal representative because they are personal representative. Does that make sense?
This could be a different person than the hers, right?
It could be, but it's usually someone who's inheriting the property.
Well, it takes 30
Anyway,
days for
people,
that. They should-
people living in a different country could be a different person.
It can be, but you have to. But there's preference. There's a law kind of who says who's entitled to be it. That's a little complicated. Yes, it could be somebody else. It could be somebody else.
Yeah, because the son and daughter live in Argentina, so they cannot be here.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
wherever.
And we do that all the time. Sometimes someone in my office will be the personal representative. So someone else can be as well. But the important thing is that's kind of the main when you're signing stuff, the personal representative is going to be the person signing. Are you clear on that, or is that confusing?
No, it's clear. Just like if I get him to sign the lease agreement, and I would start marketing the property because it's not gonna sell so fast unless it's very cheap.
Right.
So you probably can start working on
The
a pocket listing or something.
the problem is you can't. I know you can't put it on the MLS yet.
You can't put it on
You
the
can't put it on the MLS yet. So you'll have to wait because he doesn't have the authority to do anything with the property
Yeah.
yet.
Right.
So you have to wait until he's officially the personal representative.
Okay. So just,
So the court is going to appoint the
Yes.
personal representative.
and then you can sign
And
the
when
lease.
the court decided who are the hers,
Uh,
because how long it's going to take that the court decided that the hers are you, Ian, and her.
it's usually known in the very beginning.
What happens if there's no family around it? They have to find it.
So sometimes you have to hire an outside company to locate heirs. Sometimes we've got one right now where I represent 3 daughters. Okay, there's a son who's claiming to be a son. The daughters are saying he's not the son. His dad is not on the birth certificate. So we're kind of fighting it out to say whether or not he's actually entitled to. Well, it might come to, it's a really small property, so it's not worth the money. But
The court itself is looking to try to reach people that.
No. But the court is telling us before we can do anything, I need to tell them who the heirs are and show them proof. I have to prove it to the court.
What happens if you go to the closing, you sell the property, and then one of the heirs appear, the real one?
They would have to.
Car insurance.
Well, title insurance, and they would have to start their own process and prove how they're an heir. Yeah. But that doesn't happen so I've not seen it yet where somebody many years down the road comes back and says, you guys didn't tell me, right? And so long as, there's a lot of affidavits, there's a lot of things you have to sign to kind of.
They usually happens to very famous people.
Yeah.
And,
If there's a lot of
because it's not so complicated. You have the aunt that died, you have two cousins. One
Right.
live in Israel, the other
Right.
one is here. So they don't know exactly what is going on. I didn't see my cousin for 10 years. So my aunt died, I received the heir. And then after a while lives in
Right.
Israel, he realized that something happened, he
Sure.
has the right to complain, right?
It's possible. Sure, it's possible. Okay, so we get time. So to kind of like wrap this up a little bit, that's kind of that's kind of the process. I would say, and then I always get asked, how much does the probate process cost? That's something I get asked a lot. So attorneys can charge a couple different ways. They can either charge hourly, which I don't charge hourly. I pay my CPA hourly, and I hate it because every time I get charged for a phone call, it pisses me off. But you can, attorneys can charge hourly. You can charge flat fee. That's usually what we do, and then you can charge a percentage of the estate, which sometimes it works out for the client, sometimes it doesn't. The total cost, I would say, for an average probate on the low end is probably $3,500 to $4,000. On the higher end, probably $9,000 to $10,000. So under $10,000, but probably somewhere around that.
It all depends on how much property.
It depends on what the property. It depends on if I've got siblings fighting, it could be a lot more. I mean, it depends on the situation. If I'm serving, if I have to hire people to serve people in Israel, it's going to be more. So it really kind of depends on the situation. So some things that you can do to market for probate listings. So one of the best ways I kind of recommend is if you go to the Miami-Dade Property Appraiser website. Okay, so you go to this website, you can search by owner. If into the owner's tab you type a state of, you're going to get a list of probably 300, 400 properties. All right, and so what that is most of those properties have to go through probate. And so now, there's a ton of services that will provide you lists and everything like that, but most realtors aren't looking for probate listings. So if you
run away from it.
You run away from
You
it.
see that it's too complicated.
Well,
because
No as a buyer, as a listener.
oh, as a listing agent, it's okay, but still, you're gonna get a listing that you don't even know if the person you're going after is the person. So usually, I'm being very honest with you. When I see that, I say if you're in probation, I run away. I mean, I don't wanna. It's something that can take months. It can take so long. You don't know what is behind it. You don't know how many people. So that's why I'm very interested in being here because usually I wanna know if there's something that I'm mistaken about it.
Well, I think so. So anyway, so this is one way that you can do it. You could go and then you could get a list, and then you could do direct mail. You could do door knocking, and you can do it's a much more targeted, smaller list of people. So I think that's a really good way. As far as probate in general being messy, sure, it's messier than going knocking on the door and then saying, we'll sell this property, they're the owners and all that. It's definitely messier. It doesn't necessarily take more work on your end because all you have to do is sign them up and list the property. That's all you really have to do. You have to manage the client and say it might take longer, but they're going to be calling. Well, they might be calling you too, but they're going to be calling me to say what's going on, and you're going to be calling me saying, hey, I want to sell this property, But as far as what you have to do, it's not different. It's not really different. But it can take longer, and it does have to manage. You do have to manage the client. I think I get a lot of, there's realtors who specialize just in probate because it's a niche. So another way, probate, like myself, at any given time, I have about 150 to 200 active probates. Most of them have some piece of property in them. So we refer out a lot of business. I know one probate realtor who specializes in probate. She's with Keller Williams on the beach, I think. She's with Keller Williams. But all she does is probate. And what she does is at the courthouse once a month, there is a meeting for probate attorneys, and she just goes and networks with them. She does networking events.
Oh, I see. She asks everybody.
And she just okay.
Guys like you, man.
Exactly. And so you figure myself times 40, and they've got 40 times 150. That's a lot of listings.
That's a good niche.
That's a good little niche.
And the realtors don't want to work that.
And the realtors don't want to do it. And so I can tell you just from you figure all the realtors. I literally only know her that only does probate. So it's like you've got but she does really, really well.
No, realtors, most of the realtors I know, they run away from foreclosures, short sales. I love those.
Yeah.
I love the problem ones. My broker knows that. I love problems, but probate is something that usually I don't know, for me it just sounds so complicated, but it's good for a realtor that knows that no one wants it, so she gets
Yeah. So because they're not all complicated. Yeah, you're gonna have complicated deals. But we just finished one right now. I mean, I think we finished in 60 days, and there were no problems. It was
Wait,
brother
doesn't
and
What is
sister.
the
To the lease agent doesn't matter.
Yeah.
What is the price average for these properties? Can you find something like a
they're-
gray listing or is something?
They're all over. They're all over. We've got one right now that's $3 million in Palm Beach. The one's in Trinidad. They've got one that's like 1.5
But
in
this kind of
Edmonton.
properties,
But
people
those
don't
are.
more about the estate or protecting themselves, like for their heritage or something. They just
So again, they range. I've got them from multi-million dollars to $60,000 in gold that investors find. So investors find a lot of these properties. They come to us because if you've got a $78,000 property and the heirs, they don't have, someone died, they've been in this house for 30, 40, 50 years. The heirs a lot of times live in other states. They don't even care. They're like, just sell it. So the investors, are paying $40,000 for a $78,000 property. And they pay so the investors will pay my fee because the clients don't have the money to pay for it. So I hear you all your negative thing about it. There's opportunity in it. It is a lot of work.
for
I mean,
a
it's
$3
like,
million, of course, it's worth it. But for $100,000, $150,000, $200,000 property, for us sometimes it's not worth it. Like all the work that we have to do.
What's
Okay.
going on? You have to-
Wait for the probation and wait. It's something that it's
You
not.
meet
It's
the
not a
client.
property that is ready.
No, the way I see
So-
it, you meet the client. Say when it's all done, I have the listing. Is that it?
yeah, I have one right now where just to give you like more examples, a guy was door knocking. He came across the property, Red Road and Bird Road. Property is like 270, 280. Lady was cleaning it. She lives in Tampa. Older lady. Her brother had passed away. She's going to inherit the property. He called me. He says, "Can you do this?" There was some headaches in between, but we got them done. 4 months later, now he has a listing, and now it's his to
All you have to do is
list.
connect
So.
to him, whoever.
Yeah, I mean, once it's like ready, I mean, yeah, you're gonna have some waiting time, but in the meantime, you've got like this backlog of cases ready to go, and you do your other stuff. You do your rentals, you do everything else, and then you've
I
got
see
this in the
that.
pipeline. So, anyways,
I'm gonna go to the
Yeah.
court. When is that?
yeah. So so it's probate and guardianship luncheon with the
Good
Dade
point,
County
good
Bar
point. In the
Association.
meantime, to sign the lease, if somebody wants to rent the property,
Has to be the personal representative.
so
It has to wait 1 month.
It has to be appointed
Yeah.
by the court.
Yeah, has to be appointed by the court,
Even to rent.
even to rent, because they're not the owner. They have nothing to do
What
with the
happens
property.
with a tenant in case the property is rented? The tenant, you have a lease, you have like still 8 months lease ahead, and the property's in the probate. Like what happens?
Basically, so again, we had a commercial property on H Street. It was a laundromat, and so they had tenants in there, long-term tenants, and so they just wrote us the check, and we deposited that into a restricted account until
Also,
the end of
they
probate.
can stay in the property. They don't have
It
to.
goes to an money goes to escrow.
It's
account.
essentially like an escrow account, yeah. So anyway, so again, the marketing, there's definitely, you can search it on the Miami-Dade Property Appraiser website. Networking with other probate attorneys, I think, is a great, kind of niche to get into. There are lists that you can buy. So for you all, you can go to the Miami-Dade Public Records, and you can look and see what probates have been filed. And so in Miami-Dade,
Platform that give us a list of probate.
in Miami-Dade, there's about 150 probates that are filed every month. Okay, so every month there's about 150 that are filed. You can go in there and you can see the attorney and you can see the personal representative. At that point, you could contact directly to the attorney or contact the personal representative. And that's a way to go after those as well.
If the person doesn't have an attorney yet, and then I can just refer to you,
Yeah.
you work.
Yeah, so the way I would work with you all is if there's already an attorney involved, you're going to be working with that attorney.
Right.
They already have their.
Yeah.
But if you come across like the door knocking, the gentleman that I mentioned,
Right.
he found the client didn't know anybody, he recommended us, and we got into the case. So that was that would be if you come across it. And I always say if you have someone you're just not sure, I'm happy to talk to them. We do all free telephonic consultations. Our office is in Brickell. Also, this is like a side, but we do write the wills and the trust. I put a handout, so if you're looking for those, yep, there you go. So we've got writing the wills and trust, and
I might need this.
that's all I have. Unless you guys have any other questions. Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it. Thank you.